Hey investor friends, I'm Michelle Markey, and here in America, we have a crisis that's on many people's minds. And no, I'm not talking about the coronavirus pandemic. I'm talking about the financial literacy crisis that's affecting these here United States. And I'm going to be covering money matters and who doesn't care about money, right? And financial literacy is defined as a person's ability, skills, and knowledge to make money decisions. And it's also about being informed about essential financial concepts so you can make informed decisions about saving, investing, and borrowing money. Just as it's important to do exercise to maintain physical health, if you're looking to get financially swole, we better do some number crunches. And imagine replacing the song lyrics to I'm sexy and I know it with I'm financially literate and I know it, how much cooler that would be. Money affects every aspect of our lives. Whether you're a beggar on the side of the highway asking for spare change or an investment banker, you're making financial decisions every day. And if you're enjoying my coaching of you and myself on personal finance and investing, I'd love if you could please smash the like button and subscribe while gently pressing the buttons on your calculator because you're going to need this little guy to crunch some serious numbers later on. Today I'll be covering some high-level topics of what financial literacy means to me, and they include things like saving and investing, credit cards and loans, debts, inflation and interest, and risk management. And I'm going to be talking about some sobering stats and what we can do about it so we are aware, prepared, and ready to take control of our financial futures. I hope you'll brace yourself as I go through our society's epic fails at financial literacy, because the first step towards solving the problem is gaining awareness of the situation. And they include things like 18 to 34-year-olds are getting worse at financial literacy according to a FINRA Investor Education Foundation study that showed that it went from 30% in 2009 to 17% in 2018. And then less than 20% of adults are confident in saving money. 27% of millennials didn't understand the student loan terms they took on, and 54% of millennials worry now about student loans, and 46% of people don't have a rainy day fund. 57% of US adults are financially literate compared with 33% of adults worldwide, and 3 out of 5 adults don't use a budget to keep track of spending. 60% of adults have credit card debt. 78% of adults live paycheck to paycheck, and 4 out of 5 adults, or 80%, will experience financial barriers when buying a home. And these stats are pretty rough. And I'm going to talk about what I've done to try to avoid this kind of fate and what you can do too, so that hopefully you live a financially literate life and you make really good money decisions. It's never been more urgent for us to talk about this topic because I came across a Charles Schwab brokerage article where I love this quote they had, in that financial literacy is a great equalizer in the battle against social injustice, which means that having financial literacy is the key to solving social injustices, things like poverty, unemployment, lack of job opportunities, and wealth inequality. And I've suffered from some of these situations, and a survey that Charles Schwab did in 2020 found that 89% of Americans agree that lack of financial education has led to some of these society issues. And so I think that it's so critical that we not only talk about this, but help each other to solve the problem and help each other elevate in the world so that we can all be more financially stable and free. A Charles Schwab study found that people desired the following personal finance skills the most: in the value of saving money, basic money management skills, and how to set and work toward financial goals. And despite the coronavirus pandemic, most Americans prioritize financial education over health and wellness education in schools if they're going to teach supplemental topics in addition to the regular subjects, as well as Americans ranked responsible money management as the #1 skill to teach kids. The Ohio State University found a link between having higher math literacy, or also known as numeracy, with having increased financial savviness. And this is a lot like what I talked about in my very first YouTube video in having a mindset like Warren Buffett, where if you can do basic math, you are so much closer to being able to master your own finances and do investing, because that's such a critical skill to have. And it has everything to do with being able to calculate interest rates when you're trying to figure out compounding your savings and investments, or how interest rates on your credit card debt will compound and cause you to pay much more than the initial balance that you owed. And so having basic math skills is one of the most important things you could ever do. Being financially savvy also means being aware of our macroeconomic environment, including what's going on with the US and world economies. And although we're fortunate as a society to receive stimulus checks, or some people call it helicopter money, at the same time, it could be seen as a crutch for a deeper systemic problem, in that it shows that our society is lacking preparedness and lacking savings to deal with emergency situations like the coronavirus pandemic. And because of that, we skyrocketed to a 32% savings rate in April 2020. So it just shows how when we're really uncertain of what the future is going to be, we suddenly need to protect what we have and gather as much savings as we can, although that's a bit of a tug of war with what we normally have as our priority, in that the US economy is 70% based on consumer spending. So that means that if Americans didn't spend, 70% of our gross domestic product would be at risk. So it's a bit of a tug of war that we have to play between trying to save as much money as we can, both for emergencies and for retirement, as well as we want to have the American economy be healthy. So we're always trying to find a balance between saving money and doing what's right as Americans, in that we love to spend money and we love to make our American economy go around, because someone's spending is another person's income. Did you know that only a third of people in the US can correctly answer 4 or 5 out of 5 basic financial literacy quiz questions from FINRA? And that means that 2/3 or 66% of Americans are flunking this quiz by only getting 3 out of 5 on average right. That's only 60%. And so that's pretty awful, I gotta say. And I'm not gonna ruin the quiz for you. If you'd like to take it, head on over to usfinancialcapability.org/quiz.php and go see how you score. And I hope you do better than just 60%, because it's a little bit embarrassing for us as a country to score so low. There are some other countries that are first world countries that are scoring way better than us, including Canada, New Zealand. And I think that's a little bit silly for us to not be on at least a similar level as they are. And I also want to say that there's a tricky question there about stocks, and they ask a bunch of questions on things like interest rates, savings, bonds, mortgage interest, loans, and inflation. But they also have a question about if it's riskier to invest in a single stock compared to mutual funds. And I'm actually going to ruin this question for you in spoiling the answer, in that I actually think that they're wrong. So I know what they want you to answer, but I actually think that it's less risky to invest in a single stock that you've done the research and homework for, and if you followed the investing style like Warren Buffett, because he knows how to invest in a single company, and it's not riskier than investing in a big diversified mutual fund. But this quiz would like you to think that a mutual fund is safer because it's more diversified. So if any given one stock were to go down, your whole investment would not go down as much as if you would invest in a single stock that maybe you don't really know what was going to happen with that company and its stock plummeted for some reason. But that's the only little thing that I have contention with in this quiz. But otherwise, I think it's a pretty fair quiz and I hope you do well on it. While earning money and spending money makes the world go round, saving and investing some of that money helps us to have options so we can make whatever financial decisions we want to make, whether it's starting a business, saving up for retirement, helping our families, or contributing to good causes. And it's so important to save some money that my mom and dad taught me to save from an early age. So what I would do is save up whatever I'd make as a kid, and my dad used to pay me 50 cents for finding four-leaf clovers. So I'd save up this money and then I'd put in my bank account and they'd give me this little savings booklet where they'd keep track of my balance and interest that was accrued on the balance that I put into my savings account. And this is very helpful to do from a young age. So I can't recommend starting earlier enough. If you're a little kid and watching this somehow, although this video is not intended, I can't recommend it highly enough. If you're a young person, to save as much money as you can so that you can afford things like buying a car or saving up for school. And this will give you more choices in life the more that you save. And when it comes to investing, I was fortunate to have older cousins who were financially savvy and they taught me about investing. So when I was 18, I opened up my first Roth IRA and it's one of the best decisions I've ever made. And for more investing, my style has grown to be like Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger's style. So I highly recommend you check out my curated playlists of all of my investing videos, of which there are many, where I go through how to invest like these greatest of all times. And I hope that their investing style will resonate with you if you have a similar temperament. And it works for me, and I hope it will also work for you when it comes to investing. Another eventuality we'll face in life is having to pay bills, and at some point we'll probably have loans of some kind, whether it's student loan debt or credit card debt or mortgage loan. And it's important to learn how a checking account works, and that is where we pay our bills. And I learned how to balance a checkbook when I was 12. I don't think a lot of people use things like paper checks anymore, but if you ever needed to, they often come with this little booklet, and this little register has some example transactions and your balance in the checking account. For example, if you had to go to the dry cleaners and it cost you $16.15, and your remaining balance after you had to pay the dry cleaners that's left in your checking account. So probably if you used your debit card to pay them, that's where you'd probably have that $16.15 debited, and you could choose to keep track of it in this thing or just on a spreadsheet or something, or some other app that tracks your expenses and what's in your checking account. And then credit cards are pretty much an American rite of passage. Almost everybody gets a credit card. These are useful tools to be able to build credit so that we can have lower interest rates on many kinds of loans, like for car loans or getting a mortgage on a house that we're buying. And when I was 18, I opened my first credit card, and not this one, but I opened a credit card at the time. And this helped me to build credit ever since. And even though I didn't make many purchases or large purchases, it helped me gradually over time to achieve a credit score of over 800. But I also encourage you to check out and read the fine print of credit cards. In reading things like what are the specifics of using a credit card and the benefits that you get with them, because this can also make a difference in your experience in using credit. And did you know employers check the credit history of job applicants? So that could be holding back a lot of people. So I think it's critical that we help elevate each other and provide as much knowledge as we can to help our society improve financially and become not only stable, but also be able to thrive. As a quick example of credit card fine print to be aware about, some of the key figures I'd like to point out include how credit cards will have an annual percentage rate or interest rate, often of around 17% or more. So if you have 17% on your credit card balance. That's a lot of money that you're going to need to pay in interest if you don't pay the balance in full every month, as well as there's often a minimum payment for each statement period where you got to pay at least $35 or 1% of the balance, depending on how high the balance is. And I look for things like if there's an annual membership fee, and I prefer having zero fees with this, and I avoid late fees at all costs. And I enjoy when there's foreign transaction fees of 0% as well, because that's very useful when you travel. And I never end up using some of these other things like cash advances, and I also don't risk going over my credit limit. My credit utilization is usually pretty low, so that's just something to keep in mind if you're using credit cards and to be aware about. And as another quick example of if you bought something on your credit card and you only paid the minimum of $35 each month, let's say you bought a shiny new TV for $1,000. It would take you 3 years if you only paid the minimum per this slide, and you would end up having paid a quarter more than the original balance. So $267 more than the $1,000 that the TV was worth would be your total interest on top of the principal or the balance that you owed for buying this TV. So the moral of any debt story is to try to pay it down as soon as possible, because interest accrued on any debt is a killer on your finances. And also, inflation erodes the value of our money. So inflation is a very complex topic, and the Fed tries to keep inflation at 2% based on their personal consumption index measure that they use. But in general, the important thing for us to be aware about is that, unfortunately, any money that we save up and put in a bank account these days doesn't earn enough interest to offset the amount of inflation that erodes its purchasing power, which means the things that we can buy with the value of that money. So in effect, buying a banana tomorrow is costlier than it was yesterday because the value of our money went down with inflation. So keep this in mind, and it actually works the other way around too. If you have a lot of debt, the value of that debt is going down. So if you have a low interest rate on your debt, over time, you're sort of winning if inflation is eroding the value of that debt, because you're paying debt with money that's worth less in the future. So it can be a win-win, but overall, I generally suggest we pay off our debts as soon as possible and try not to sit on it for too long if we can help it. And then the last point I'd like to make is when it comes to risk management. We usually consider this point when it comes to emergency situations like getting health insurance and car insurance when we have health and car emergencies or accidents. And that is very helpful. So we pay a premium and we pay our deductibles before our health insurance carriers will cover whatever medical expense we have. And this is another key thing, that in order to lead a more financially secure life, we try to have this in place as well. If you stayed with me all the way to the end here, congrats, you're already way more financially literate than you were before you clicked on this video. And my final calls to action for you include that you don't really have to have a budget per se, you just have to be willing to track your spending and saving. And you could do it in places like having a notebook where you keep track of it, or a spreadsheet, or whatever system works best for you. And just come up with something that you can stay disciplined about and that you're willing to keep up with, because that's the most important thing. And if you enjoyed this video or learned something, please like and subscribe. And I wish you well on your journey towards becoming more financially literate and also becoming the best investor you can be. Till next time.